JLF's Brave New World welcomes you back to our second session today. Those of you who missed our earlier session, The Great March, Barkha Dutt in conversation with Pragya Tiwari, and all of the other wonderful sessions featuring our speakers, including Nobel laureates Abhijit V. Banerjee, Esther Duflo, Oran Pamuk, Professor Homi Bhabha, Chigozie Obiama, Jhumpa Lahiri, and so many others. You can watch them on our Facebook page, JLF Lit Fest, or on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Lit Fest JLF. This coming Tuesday, we have a special session marking Bloomsday, celebrating James Joyce's great masterpiece, Ulysses. Two of the greatest living Irish writers, and poet Paul Muldoon and Colm Tóibín, arguably Ireland's greatest living novelists, recently talked with Booker-nominated Jeet Thayil on the influence of Joyce and why Ulysses still matters today. This will be at 7:30 p.m. IST, 3 p.m. British Summer Time, and 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Remember, this is on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, of course, we will be bringing you His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. Our official radio partner is Red FM, Bajate Raho. Our next session is The End of the Ocean. Maja Lunde in conversation with Catharine Morris. This session is presented in partnership with our great supporters, the Norwegian Embassy in India. Maja Lunde's latest sci-fi novel, The End of the Ocean, explores the threat of a devastating worldwide drought witnessed throughout the lives of a father, a daughter, and a woman who will risk her life to save the future. The best-selling Norwegian author speaks to Catharine Morris about the climate crisis and how she mirrors nature and its disruptions in her fiction. Maja Lunde's first novel, The History of Bees, is a worldwide success and was the best-selling book in any genre in Germany in 2017, with more than 90 consecutive weeks on the German bestseller list. The sequel, Blue, will also be translated worldwide. We've had the pleasure of hosting Maja before on the Jaipur Literature Festival stages. Catharine Morris has worked at the Times Literary Supplement in London since 2008. She commissions and edits book reviews in the fields of travel biography, memoir, bibliography, and language, as well as reviews of journals. Please do remember to comment and ask questions by typing it in the comment section below. In case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Lit Fest, JLF. And in case we drop off due to bandwidth issues, just hang in there. We'll be right back on Facebook. Ladies and gentlemen, The End of the Ocean. Maja Lunde in conversation with Catharine Morris.
Hello, Maya. Thank you very much for joining us. Now might be the time to mention that Maya has recently won two very prestigious literary prizes, the Peer Gynt Prize and the Bjørnson Prize. The Bjørnson Academy wrote in their statement that Maja Lunde is an author who fights for human dignity and rights. Her books have succeeded in advocating these issues in a way that resonates with readers throughout the world. Perhaps you could start by telling us about the Climate Quartet and how you came to write it.
Well, it actually started with the history of bees, and I got that idea because I saw a documentary about colony collapse disorder and about the importance of bees. And I realized the pollinating insects of the world are threatened, and I was curious about how they live and their importance. I wanted to go into it, and also from the very first day, I got the ideas for the three different storylines in the book, the three different people that I write about. Because, with fiction, at least for me, it's always about the people. It's always about finding these characters and finding the stories and having interest in them and wanting to be there in their lives and in their brains. And when I wrote The History of Bees, in the beginning, I thought it would be a standalone. I had plenty of other ideas. I get new ideas every day and I have a computer full of them. But I realized when I wrote that book that it started something. I've always been engaged in the climate issues. It's always been very important to me. I grew up. I guess it's partly due to my mother talking a lot with me about it. And I always loved nature. All nature has always been very important to me. I was a kid going out picking flowers, pressing them, collecting. I draw a lot of flowers and plants, and I can remember from being a child, really feeling the magic of nature. So it's been a part of me always. And also probably because I'm Norwegian, and in Norway we live very close to nature. It's always a tree, we always see a lot of nature, even, and our capital is very small. But when I wrote the history of bees, it opened up to so many other stories, and I got so many ideas. I got the idea of this young man and walking alone in a drought-ridden southern Europe in the future. And I realized I wanted to write about him. And I also, very early realized he found a boat. That was one idea. Just a picture, a young man walking alone in a drought-ridden landscape, and then he finds a boat in the middle of nowhere. And then I had a second image of an elderly woman standing by a waterfall, being really angry. And I didn't know anything else about her. I just knew she was very connected to this waterfall. And I knew she was really angry and had a lot of passion. And I sort of, put these two pictures on the wall, so to speak, in my head. And I had a lot of other ideas as well. The third novel, which will be published in English next year, or maybe the year after, I don't know, but it will be published. It's called Przewalski's Horse in Norwegian, Przewalski's Hest. It's about threatened animals. And I got that idea also when I wrote the history of bees. So I had all these different ideas, and then I realized after a while that they were all connected. It's like a big jigsaw puzzle with a lot of pieces, and they all fit together in one big image, in one big picture. Our world. And then I started to pick the stories that I wanted to tell. And I quite soon realized I wanted to tell these two stories in the second book, the old woman and the young man. And I realized that these two stories were connected. And I also early realized I wanted to write the third book about the horse. And then I knew from the very beginning, when I decided there had to be more books, I actually knew there had to be 4, and I knew what the ending of the series would be. So I have a very clear vision of the ending of this quartet as well.
There must have been a huge amount of research involved. How did you go about it? How did you start on such a big project?
Well, it's a good question. It's all, with the second novel, I had The End of the Ocean. It was easier than the history of bees because I didn't know anything of bees or life inside of a beehive or beekeeping or development of beekeeping for that matter. So I had to do a lot of research. With the second novel, The End of the Ocean, it's a lot about sailing. Because this boat is very central in the story, because the elderly woman, Signe, she has a boat, she lives on a boat, and this young man finds a boat. So there's a connection, of course. And I have sailed a lot. My father has always had a boat, and I grew up on that sailing boat. It's quite small, but it's the boat I write about in the novel. And when I was 17, I spent a whole year on a school ship, a tall ship. So I know the ocean, and I know a lot about sailing, and that made that part of it much easier. I had to do a lot of research on glaciers, because this is very much a book about glaciers, and it's also a book about exploiting natural resources, and especially water. It's about water, I mean, putting it in pipes, and hydro and electrical power, and all those fights that has followed in these kinds of developments. In Norway, it has been a huge issue for years, as I know it is in India as well. And there has been so much anger in small places connected to it, and families teared apart because of water fights. And 70% of Norwegian waterfalls are now in pipes. So it's been a huge thing here. So yes, I did a lot of research on that, and also part of the book takes place in a refugee camp. So I actually visited several refugee camps in Greece when I did research for that part, and I did a lot of. I got to know people there. I worked a bit. I spent time with people, heard their stories, and that also had a lot of impact on the text.
And in one of the novels, we're taken to 2041, so we're in France in 2041, and then in the other novel we're in China in 2098. So you had to do a lot of your own imagining what that will be like. How faithful were you to your research? Do you think these are realistic scenarios, the world we encounter in 2098? Do you think that's a realistic vision?
Well, in the history of bees, yes, we're in 2098, and it's a scenario where all the pollinating insects have disappeared. And that part of the novel started with, what if all the pollinating insects disappear? And I don't think it will happen exactly as I have, as it is in my story, but I think there's definitely some truth to it, because we do depend on these insects to have a lot of what we eat. But I don't think all of them will disappear like I have written, but there's definitely some part of it can very well happen. It's a decline. Insects are disappearing all the time, and that's a huge problem all over the world right now. In The End of the Ocean, on the other hand, I actually didn't start with what if. I started with looking at climate, and I started with looking at numbers, and I tried to find out what can very well happen if we don't stop global warming. And I looked at scenarios developed by researchers for how Europe can be in 2041. And I actually, I have just sort of described what is in these numbers, sadly, because it is quite gloomy. And this is not even worst case.
Right. Yeah.
So that's it was another way of doing it. Yes. And I had one very good water expert that I worked quite close with during the research, and she read everything. And so this is definitely not fiction. Of course, it's fiction, but what I describe might very well happen.
Yeah, it's probably worth mentioning it has some profound political effects, doesn't it, too? Conflicts breaking out all over the place because of access to water, people migrating north in search of water. There's a strong focus in both books on the interactions between family members, especially parents and children. And I was just wondering, do you think how we treat each other is related to how we treat the environment, or do you view those things as separate themes in the novels?
Oh, sorry, I lost you a bit. How we treat each other are
connected. So there's quite a strong theme, isn't there, of parents and children, and the parents quite often misunderstand their children or think they know what's best for them, but which is completely wrong. Do you feel, do you view that as a separate theme in the novel, or do you think that is in some way connected to the broader environmental theme?
Well, I mean, everything is connected to everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, it's definitely connected. I think. I mean, we do so much for our children, and it's a paradox that we are not able to. We are willing to do everything, except from, making this planet a better place for our children. And that's really, it's so strange. And we are, Homo sapiens, the animal. We are a fantastic animal. We are able of doing so many great things. And we are quite often good parents. We take care of our children in a very special way. And we most of us, we will do everything for our children. Really, that's what, when you have children, you will die for them. That's, the biggest thing a person can do. But still, it's so hard to plan 30 years ahead. And that's such a paradox. And I don't have the answers. I just question that, why are we like that? What is what's wrong with us?
Yeah.
How come we don't manage to plan a little bit more ahead? Why do we stop tomorrow? How about 30 years from now, or 10 for that matter?
And you're also a screenwriter. Did you feel as if your screenwriting work, has that influenced your novels?
A lot of the readers tell me that they can quite easily visualize the content of the books when they read it. It's like I quite often hear that it's like seeing a film. It's like seeing a film. People quite often read the books fast and then have this visual feeling. But for me, of course, I have a lot of, I worked as a screenwriter for quite some years. I have a master in film, actually, and visual media is very important to me. I love to take photos. I like Instagram, and I do photograph a lot. But what is actually most important to me when I write is not only to see the picture, but to be inside the head of the characters. To feel what they feel, and to cry when they cry, or laugh when they laugh, and to be in the situation physically. And when I wrote The History of Water, I was so thirsty because the end of the ocean. It's called The History of Water in German, so that's why it's called actually just blue in Norwegian, blå. But The End of the Ocean, when I wrote that book, I was so thirsty because one of the David, the French young man, water is very important to him, and there's this huge lack of water, and I was just so thirsty with him, and I felt suddenly grateful for being able to have a glass of water. And I haven't really. Norway is such a water country. We have so much water. I never even thought about it before. How lucky I am to have this. And when the other part about the elderly woman who's called Signe, most of her story goes on in the boat on the ocean. And I was really wet and cold with her. I was out there in the storm together with her. And to feel it both emotionally but also physically, that's really what I love about writing fiction. And sometimes when I feel it, and when I can, both physically and emotionally, the readers can when they read it as well. And that's the magic of writing, how my feelings can come through to them through a piece of paper. It's just wonderful.
Would you say that your books have a particular function or mission, or are you mostly just responding to your own interests?
When I write, I never think about the readers, and that might sound strange. I do have some. I have on this subconscious level, I do know that it will be read, and there's this, at that level, I have a feeling I write to someone, not a specific reader, but just someone that it will respond, But when I write, I think about the people I write about and the story, and I try to be there. And I never start with a mission. I never start with a message. I start with these stories and these people, and I don't even know what the message, the message of the end of the ocean. Of course, it is that we should take better care of our planet, but that's something, that's the message of so much. It's not a clear message apart from that, I think, and I'd never start with that. It always starts with the characters and the stories.
People have said that lockdown has allowed pollution to clear a bit temporarily, and so we have a glimpse of what life might be like if we changed our way of life quite radically. I'm just wondering, has that affected your outlook? Has coronavirus in general perhaps affected your outlook?
Before the virus hit us, I was really scared. I could wake up in the middle of the night. I mean, when the fire was on in Australia, for example, that scared me so much. The coronavirus actually made me less scared of. I sort of have a pause, a break from my climate anxiety. Actually, I don't find the word anxiety right either, because it's more of I'm frightened. It's a response to an actual something that is actually dangerous, not anxiety, which is sort of turned inwards, but it is to something out there. But during the first weeks, I was really scared. Everything fell apart. We didn't know anything about what would happen. The Norwegian economy collapsed completely. And I was, just terrified of the future in another way that I had been before.
Yeah.
And right now, but then I also thought, okay, maybe this will be good somehow. Maybe this will actually change us. Maybe this is something that can be. I will never call it good, because it's terrible, and there's so many people suffering, and there's so many people dying, and it's a terrible virus. It's a scary illness. But it's maybe after this we will be able to change things quicker, because what the virus has showed us is how quick we can respond when there is an actual threat in front of us, and how good we can work together, and how able we people are at doing things on a large scale really fast. And all these arguments we had, like whenever you say that you should close the city center for cars, then the air pollution will go down, and then there's always 20 arguments against it because it's difficult somehow. And there's always an argument against doing something because it's inconvenient or unpractical. But the coronavirus, what we have done now in response to the virus, has shown us how quick we can respond and how much we can do together if we try to. And hopefully, maybe there will come something good out of it. And in Norway, I think we do talk more. I'm not sure, because we still use so many. I mean, we still dig up our oil, and now we support the oil industry even more to get the people, for people not losing their jobs. So it's really hard.
Yes, I was going to ask you how you feel Norway is doing in terms of climate change, and sounds as if not as well as you'd like.
I know we have quite a good reputation abroad. We are in front on different topics. We have done a lot for the rainforests around the world, for example. But still, we are a paradox, because we want to be a green leader, and we have earned ourselves filthy rich from oil. So it's really hard to go abroad and brag about what we do, because I'm not super proud. I won't say that. I think we could do much more, especially because we do have funds. Where we have a lot of money in funds from oil, so we're in a quite special position when it comes to green energy, to development technology, and we could do much more than we do.
Your books tend to be described as cli-fi, so climate fiction. Does that feel like the right description to you? And is that a type of fiction you're drawn to as a reader?
I like books that sometimes get that label. I never use that label on my books. I don't use any labels, actually. I just call them novels. But I mean, if people call, I don't mind people calling it climate fiction. But for me, it's so much about relationship stories. Sometimes people call them the climate quartet, but you could also very much call it the parent-children quartet, because all the books are about parents and children, and more than climate, the books are actually about nature and about endangered species. So there's no novel is about one thing. There's several things in the books.
And is it right that your writing you've changed direction slightly lately?
Well, when the pandemic hit, I was working on the fourth and last book, which is set in Svalbard, north of Norway in the ocean, in 2110, that's 12 years after the history of bees, after the future story in the history of bees. And in that book, I will try to connect the dots. I will try to, when the readers read it, hopefully they will see how this is actually one big picture, one big story, all fourth book. What's really strange is that I've known for several years that I wanted this book to start with an illness, an epidemic illness in a small society. That virus will kill most of the people in the small community, and it will be about the survivors. So it was really strange. I have been doing research on the virus and bacteria and different illnesses for quite some months. And then suddenly the pandemic hit, and I felt like I have walked into one of my novels. It was a very strange feeling. And suddenly quite hard to write fiction. So I stopped writing fiction. It was also hard, because I had suddenly all my 3 kids were at home. We had homeschooling, which I hated. And it was impossible to, have to think long thoughts. It was impossible to write because I was the door to my room always was opened and someone came in, and yeah, I never had, you know, everyone who had kids home, being a teacher, you know how this was. It was quite rough, for most of us at least. And then, but what I was able to write was, I wrote what happened actually. I wrote a diary, and now it seems like that will be a book. So at least some writing came out of it.
Yeah.
And for me, writing, you know, when I felt that the world has reality was suddenly so massive. Suddenly it was there. It was impossible not to think about it. It was impossible to use my imagination because I was just completely filled with what was going on. And it was impossible to even read other fiction because I was just looking at the internet, checking new numbers, stuff like that all the time. But I managed to write about what happened and about try to look at it in these longer perspectives and to see what it did to us, and try to be, you know, sort of, I wrote small essays almost. So that will be a book. And then hopefully I will soon be able to write, to start to work on Authorial again. I am going on a research trip to Svalbard in August. So at least if it hasn't kickstarted until then, hopefully that will will start me kickstart me again.
I think we're going to move very shortly to audience questions. I'll perhaps ask you just one very quick question. The picture of life at the middle of the and the end of the 21st century in your books, it's quite bleak, isn't it? But there are moments of hope. How hopeful do you feel?
It all depends. I have every second day I feel hopeful, and every second day I feel sad or frightened or despair, for that matter. But right now I think it has been a bit easier to be hopeful because of what we talked about. This has shown us our abilities, I think.
I'll just move to
you know, also the world is a scary place right now with what goes on in the United States. Yes. So it depends. It really does depend.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go for the first question here. You seem to have made a great pioneering start in cli-fi. The House of Bees was brilliant, intertwining the lives of bees with people. Do you believe humankind should start to hold off its self-interest to avoid extinction of several other vital species for our own well-being? Humankind seems to be shooting itself in the foot.
We are definitely doing that. And I think we should start to watch ourselves as guardians of this planet. We are the smartest animal on this planet. And in that strength, there's also a large, big responsibility. And we, instead of thinking about how we can exploit this planet and how we can develop it for our own good, we should look at how we can take care of it as guardians, and for the planet's good and for all the other species. So yes, definitely.
When climate is an issue of concern for our very being, why do you think politics enter instead of thinking about the big picture? Sorry,
I didn't get that first part.
I think there's quite a strong political element in how we respond to climate change and environmental disaster. Why do you think we let that happen? Why aren't we better at looking at the big picture?
That's a very hard question. And I don't have the answer, really. That's something, especially in the third novel, The Przewalski Horse, I wrote about animals, but I also write about us, the human animals, and I ask, why are we the animal who ended up ruling the world? How come we are the ones who changed everything? And what kind of abilities, what kind of resources do we have in us that made us that animal? And are the answer also in us? Do we have it in us to change it into a better place? Or are we sort of doomed because we are the way we are, because we are not able to think 30 years ahead, or 100 for that matter, because we are not able to visualize far ahead. We only think about tomorrow. And that's the same with politics. Elections are 3 years or 2 years ahead, and then the quick fixes seems very tempting instead of going for doing great stuff in the long run.
And the next question, you made quite a mark writing for children and young adults. Do you have to adapt your writing style as you address adults?
I have written several different children books, but all of them, most of them, apart from a few books for very young children, have a first-person storyteller, a first-person voice. And then when you write that, for me, it's always about finding the language of the main character. All my books are first person, and when that main character is a child, quite often it's a book for children, or it can be read by children. But the last 2 books I've written that have been put in the children department of the bookstore, I actually don't see them as children books. I see them more as books for everyone that you can read with your kids, or maybe even alone. It's like that. Some of my favorite books of all times are by Astrid Lindgren, who is a fantastic Swedish. She was called a children books writer, but her books are actually for everyone, I think. So I'm not that. I'm thinking less and less about target group, and as I said about readers as well, I have to like the text myself. I have to want to read the book. That's important, whether it's for children or adults.
We have much less fiction about climate change. We need more. Do you agree?
And I agree that we definitely we need more books about nature, about appreciating nature, and about stopping to see ourselves as center and starting to see what goes on around us, and all the small individuals that are working all the time around us. And but it's hard to say that other writers should write. It has to come from the heart. It's hard to write fiction, and authors need to find. It has to be true to the author. So I can't tell other authors what to write. But I see, at least in Norway, when the fear of climate changes and the nature crisis is growing, there tends to be more books about this as well, because authors write about what goes on in the world. So here, at least, we have several publications every year, which will probably fit the climate fiction label.
And what have you been reading lately?
A couple of weeks ago, I read Sally Rooney, Normal People. I liked it. And then also I read the latest non-fiction book of Dave Golson. He wrote about bumblebees. And this book was about gardening. I love gardening. I have a garden. I spend quite a lot of time out there. A bit too much, my husband thinks, but well, and I like that one very much too. So that's a couple. I have an only climb on my table right now. I'm planning to start reading it when I'm done with Ghost. So yeah, a couple of books from the last weeks.
Do you think that climate change is going to be the more devastating calamity than the corona pandemic?
Sorry, it's more devastating.
There's a question about climate change and the corona pandemic. Is one going to be more threatening than the other?
Well, the pandemic will pass. Unfortunately, I think we will have more. Not that virus, but other. But of course, the climate crisis and the nature crisis is definitely a bigger issue in the long run. But these things are connected, you know. We wouldn't have the virus or the pandemic if we didn't travel as much as we do. If we didn't, I mean, globalizing is part of the problem, both when it comes to the pandemic, but also when it comes to climate changes. So these things are definitely connected.
In fact, we have
everything is.
A rather funny comment here. Somebody's noticed that I used to work in the obituaries department at the Times. Is Miss Lunde's work almost a timely reminder that we might all end up in these columns if we don't rein ourselves in? Yes, I think so. I think we're drawing. I think we're drawing to a close now, unless there are any more questions. I think. Have a quick look. There's a question here about why did I choose Claude Monet for my novel? I haven't, in fact, written a novel. Is that another Catherine? Is there another Catharine Morris I don't know about?
It probably is another Catharine Morris.
Maybe I should have claimed credit for it.
Yeah, I had a question. Recently, all our WhatsApps have been filled with this image of a hillside, sort of literally slipping into the fjord with houses in Norway. What caused that? Was it a thunder shower, a burst, a cloud burst? What happened?
It was what's the English word for it? The mud sort of.
The mudslide. It was mudslide.
Yeah, too much water pushed it down. Yes, there's been we are living with weather and records all the time here, like everywhere else in the world. And this winter we had extremely a lot of snow in the mountains, no snow in the seaside. But this extremely much snow in the mountains, and when that melts, it can be really dangerous. So that's probably what you've seen.
Thank you so much, Maja Lunde. Thank you so much, Catharine Morris. For those of you who haven't read Bees or Blue, please go out there. You can pick it up. Absolutely extraordinary books, both. Thank you all for joining us in this conversation. And thank you, of course, the wonderful Norwegian Embassy who continues to support us, not just for this session, but for the Jaipur Bookmark and so much more of what we do. We thank our official radio partners, Red FM, Bajate Raho, and please do remember to log in tomorrow, Sunday, the 14th of June, for another set of exciting sessions from JLF's Brave New World. We have present tense from the battlefront, Ambarish Satwik and Arunava Sinha in conversation. Even as the medical establishment battles the virus, there are rifts and contradictions within. Vascular surgeon and writer Ambarish Satwik speaks with literary translator Arunava Sinha about the terrors of the pandemic across the perspectives of history and literature, as well as in the present tense. This will be at 7:30 p.m. IST, 3 p.m. British Summer Time, and 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This will be followed by War and Peace, Isildine Abulation conversation with Marie Brenner. Marie Brenner and Isildine will talk about the incredible loss that Abouleish had. Dr. Isildine Abouleish is a Palestinian Canadian physician and an internationally recognized humanitarian, human rights, and inspirational peace activist. He's dedicated his life to using health as a vehicle for peace. Dr. Abouleish's book, I Shall Not Hate, a Gaza doctor's journey on the road to peace and human dignity, is inspired by the loss of his three daughters, Bisan, Maya, and Aya, and their cousin Noor, to Israeli shelling on 16 January 2009, even as they stepped out of their home. It's also become a testament to his commitment to forgiveness as a solution to conflict and a catalyst towards peace. And this will be at 9 p.m. IST, 4:30 p.m. British Summer Time, and 11:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Thank you all for watching. Remember our new sessions on Tuesday as well, that will be celebrating Ulysses, James Joyce, and of course on Wednesday we have His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Thank you, take care, see you tomorrow.